Max Verstappen might be planning to walk away from Formula One at his peak. Right after the Japanese Grand Prix, the most dominant driver of this generation didn't talk about winning the next race. He questioned whether staying in the sport is even worth it. And that single moment has triggered a chain reaction across the entire paddock. Because we're not talking about a declining driver. We're talking about a four-time world champion, still in his prime, with a contract on the table, and a real option to leave after 2026. But here's the part that changes everything. He didn't just say it. He's already acting differently. Skipping key team activities. Driving outside Formula One. Focusing on things he actually enjoys. Which means this is no longer frustration. This is a transition. And if Verstappen leaves now, Formula One doesn't just lose a driver. It loses its biggest star, its biggest storyline, and possibly the direction of the entire sport. Subscribe now, because what Verstappen is planning could shock Formula One sooner than anyone expects. At first, it sounded like something we've heard before. A driver frustrated. A bad race. A difficult car. That's normal in Formula One. But this time, it didn't stop there. Because Verstappen didn't just complain. He started repeating the same idea. Again. And again. And each time, it became more serious. Back in late 2025, he made a statement that most people ignored. If the new regulations weren't enjoyable, he wouldn't stay. At the time, it felt like pressure. A negotiation tactic. Something drivers say to influence decisions. But now, that same message is coming back, with consequences. Because nothing has improved. If anything, it's getting worse. And Japan exposed that completely. This wasn't a fight for the podium. This wasn't even a competitive weekend. This was a driver completely disconnected from his car. Struggling to control it. Struggling to trust it. Describing it as unpredictable, unstable, and almost impossible to drive. And here's why that matters more than people think. Because Verstappen is not just fast. He's precise. He relies on feeling. On instinct. On knowing exactly where the limit is, without thinking. But in Suzuka, that connection wasn't there. And when that connection disappears, so does confidence. But here's the detail that changes everything. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound emotional. He sounded distant. Almost like someone already stepping away. And that's far more dangerous. Because frustration means you're still fighting. Detachment means you're already letting go. And this is where the situation starts to feel different. Because this is no longer about fixing a car. It's about questioning the entire experience of being in Formula One. And once that question appears, it doesn't go away. It grows. It follows you from race to race. From weekend to weekend. Until eventually, it demands an answer. And that answer might come sooner than anyone expects. And that's exactly what started happening immediately after Suzuka. Because Verstappen didn't just leave the track. He left the environment. While Red Bull stayed behind for one of the most important development tests of the future. He walked away from it completely. No involvement. No presence. No interest. Instead, he went to Germany. To the Nürburgring. To drive something that, on paper, shouldn't matter as much as Formula One. But in reality, it might matter more to him right now. Because what he found there is something Formula One is slowly losing. Freedom. No energy management. No artificial limits. No unpredictable systems fighting against the driver. Just a car. A track. And pure control. And that contrast is where everything becomes clear. Because this wasn't just a different race. It was a different feeling. And for a driver like Verstappen, feeling is everything. But here's where it becomes even more revealing. This wasn't a one-time escape. This is becoming a direction. Because every decision he's making lately points the same way. Away from complexity. Away from restriction. Toward something simpler. Something more real. And once a driver starts moving in that direction, coming back becomes harder. But here's the part that should worry everyone inside Formula One. Because Verstappen is not just exploring. He's comparing. Directly. Silently. But clearly. Formula One on one side. Everything else on the other. And when one starts giving him what the other cannot, the decision starts making itself. But now, there's a deeper layer. One that connects everything. Because Verstappen doesn't need to rush. He doesn't need to decide today. He has time. He has leverage. And most importantly, he has options. Real options. Because his contract may run longer, but it includes flexibility. A way out if things don't align. Which means this isn't just frustration building with no exit. There is an exit. Already in place. Already possible. And that changes everything. Because now, every race becomes a test. Not just for performance. But for his future. Every weekend becomes a question. Does this still make sense? Is this still worth it? And the more that answer leans toward no, the closer we get to something Formula One is not prepared for. Because if Verstappen continues down this path, then what looks like small decisions today will turn into one massive decision tomorrow. And by the time that decision becomes public, it won't feel sudden. It will feel inevitable. And this is where everything becomes impossible to ignore. Because at some point, a driver stops testing the idea of leaving and starts preparing for it. Quietly, without announcements, without drama. And that's exactly what this situation is starting to look like. Because when you step back and look at the full picture, the pattern is clear. Public statements questioning the sport. Frustration that doesn't fade, but grows. A visible disconnect with the car. A shift toward other categories. And most importantly, a mindset that is no longer fully committed. Each of these on its own means nothing. Together, they mean everything. Because this is how exits begin in Formula One. Not with a press conference, but with distance. Emotional distance. Mental distance. And once that gap appears, it only moves in one direction. But here's the part that makes this even more critical. Because Verstappen is not being pushed out. He's choosing. And that changes the entire dynamic. Because when a driver is forced out, the sport adapts. It replaces. It moves on. But when a driver chooses to leave at the peak, that raises questions no one can easily answer. Why would the best driver in the world walk away? What is he seeing that others are not saying? And that's where the impact becomes much bigger than one career. Because this decision, if it happens, will not stay isolated. It will influence how other drivers think, how young talents see their future, how teams evaluate the direction of the sport. Because suddenly, the goal is no longer just reaching Formula One. It's deciding whether staying there is worth it. And that's a completely different conversation. But now, everything leads to the final stage. Because sooner or later, Verstappen will have to decide. Not publicly, not for the cameras, but for himself. Stay, and accept the direction Formula One is taking. Or leave, and choose something that gives him back what he feels he's losing. And that decision won't be based on contracts, or money, or titles. It will be based on something much simpler. Whether he still enjoys driving. Because at the end of all of this, that's the only thing that matters. And if the answer to that question becomes no, then the shock won't be that Verstappen retires after 2026. The shock will be that, deep down, he already made that decision. And that's the part no one inside Formula One wants to say out loud. Because if this decision is already forming, then everything happening right now is just the lead up. The final races. The final negotiations. The final attempts to convince him to stay. Because make no mistake, if Verstappen leaves, it won't be quiet inside the paddock. It will trigger reactions. From teams. From sponsors. From the FIA. Because this isn't just any driver. This is the driver. The reference. The benchmark everyone is chasing. And losing that creates a vacuum. A gap that cannot be filled overnight. But here's where it becomes even more complex. Because Formula One has built its current narrative around drivers like Verstappen. Dominance. Rivalries. Records. Moments that define eras. And suddenly, all of that is at risk. Not because of failure, but because of choice. And that's what makes this different from anything we've seen before. Because this isn't a decline. This isn't a slow exit. This is a potential walk away, at the highest level. And that forces the sport into a position it's not comfortable with. Adapting under pressure. Reacting instead of controlling. Because if the issue is the direction of the sport itself, then fixing it is not simple. It's not one change. It's not one update. It's a fundamental shift. And those take time. But time is exactly what they don't have. Because the clock is already ticking. Every race weekend. Every statement. Every decision Verstappen makes from now on moves this story forward. Quietly, but inevitably. And by the time the public sees the full picture, it might already be too late. Because decisions like this are not made in the spotlight. They are made in private. In moments no one records. In conversations no one hears. Until one day, they become real. But here's the final layer. The one that connects everything. Because if Verstappen does leave after 2026, it won't just define the end of an era. It will define the beginning of a new question. One that Formula One cannot avoid. What kind of sport are they building? Because if the answer doesn't align with what drivers like Verstappen want, then this won't be the last time we see something like this. It will be the first. And that's the real story behind everything we've uncovered. Not just whether Verstappen is planning to retire, but whether Formula One can evolve fast enough to give him a reason not to. And now, we reach the point where everything stops being theory. Because sooner or later, this story will face reality. A decision. A moment where Verstappen either commits or walks away. And here's what makes that moment so powerful. When it happens, it won't feel dramatic. It won't be emotional. It will feel calm, calculated, almost expected. Because everything we've seen so far is leading there. Step by step, quietly building toward that outcome. And that's exactly how the biggest decisions in Formula One are made. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Because by the time a driver like Verstappen makes that call, he already knows the answer. Weeks before, months before, maybe even now. But here's where it becomes something even bigger. Because when that decision becomes public, it won't just affect Red Bull. It won't just affect one team. It will reshape the entire grid. Driver markets will explode. Seats will open. Opportunities will shift overnight. Because replacing Verstappen is not just about speed. It's about presence, impact, the ability to define an era. And there are very few drivers in history who can do that. Which means Formula One won't just lose a competitor. It will lose a cornerstone. But here's the part that connects everything we've talked about from the beginning. Because if Verstappen leaves after 2026, it won't feel like an ending. It will feel like a consequence. The result of everything that has been building beneath the surface. The regulations. The complexity. The loss of that pure connection between driver and machine. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because it forces Formula One to confront a reality it cannot ignore anymore. You can build faster cars. You can create more advanced systems. You can push technology further than ever before. But if the driver stops enjoying it, none of that matters. And that's the truth sitting at the center of this entire story. Because at the end of the day, Formula One is not just about machines. It's about the people who drive them. And if the best of them decides to step away, then the real question is no longer about Verstappen's future. It's about whether the sport can still inspire the next one. Because if it can't, then what we're witnessing right now is not just a possible retirement. It's the beginning of a transformation Formula One may not be ready for.